Hello and welcome to Just One More Watch. Welcome today to another installment of Loom Wars episode 8, the ongoing series where I get to live out my frustrated sports commentator fantasies and all of you get to watch various dial and hands of watches fade into obscurity on your chosen devices. We're a funny bunch. Are we not? Anyway, I like to make these videos every few months if I feel I've got the right selection of pieces in the house. Last time I made it, Loom Wars episode 7, I had 8 dive watches. You're thinking dive watches, you're thinking Loom. Today, not so much. It's a really eclectic and interesting selection. A couple of tool watches, a couple of chronographs, a couple of field watches. Only 3 of the 8 are out and out dive watches, but that doesn't mean to say the Loom isn't fantastic on some, if not all of them. Alright, let's flip the camera where I may or may not use such sporting cliches as it's a game of two halves, Jim. It's gonna come down to who wants it most today. And gee, they really knocked it out of the park with this one. So here are today's contenders then. I reckon there's about 18,000 Australian dollars worth of watches lined up on the map of the world today. Admittedly, about 15,000 of them lie there in the form of that gorgeous little two-tone 36mm roller. They are presented to you in their quarter-final pairing. So this is the 2x2x2x2 that's going to go head-to-head. So we've got those two Rolex Explorer likes, well, one real one and one homage on the left. We've got a couple of field watches, a couple of chronos, and a couple of edgy modern micro divers. Let's have a closer look at them. So the watch on the left is what the watch on the right wants to be when it grows up, or perhaps when it shrinks down. Given that the San Martin mimics the old 214-270 39mm Explorer, and this is a brand new 124-273 two-tone oyster steel and yellow gold 36mm Explorer coming in at the princely sum of 15,250 Aussie dollars. Let's leave aside the paradox of a half precious metal tool watch for now and just appreciate this thing for what it is. It is a design classic and it is beautiful in that size and in that material. A truly striking little watch. I have to say though, I have been enjoying the much cheaper San Martin since it arrived in Sydney about a month ago. I love the case shape. I love the fact that they've gone with inverted mid-links of the end link. The loom is actually pretty good even though it's C3 old radium style. Next up, it's our pair of field watches. Perhaps not David versus Goliath, perhaps this is more young pretender versus the old master. Swiss watch company Bunker on the left versus the Hamilton Khaki King. Today with PVD coated case and black leather strap on the right. Now field watches, as mentioned, not dive watches, but that doesn't mean to say that they can't have decent loom. We're about to find out how decent, aren't we? The Swiss watch company Bunker, definitely one of the most impressive micro brand watches that I have reviewed this year, if not in the last couple of years. Fairly generic field watch style design, but so much attention to detail in the materials used and the quality of those materials. Coated titanium, heaps of anti-reflective undercoating on the crystal, and heaps of loom, as you'll see. Hamilton Khaki King, such a strong offering though, great value for money and very, very well done across the board, apart from the lack of anti-reflective undercoating on the sapphire crystal giving me problems, as you can see there. We're about to find out how good the loom is. Next up, it's the two chronos. That's really the only thing these two watches have in common. The Seiko Sumo Chrono, an absolute unit. 200 meters, ISO divers rated, solar, runs for 6 months between charges. It's big, it's chunky, it weighs half a ton. The Hemel airfoil on the right, ST1901 powered. It's the first of its kind that I've seen with those specs. I'm interested to find out how the loom goes. The Seiko, very, very impressed with this one. When I picked it up about a month or so ago, I got a cracking deal on it, which always helps, and it makes you wonder why people would go for the auto. Seiko's Lume Bright is always a bit of a standard. It's great to have one as a benchmark in every episode of Loom Wars. The Hemel is a full loom dial though, BGW9, so it'll have that bright ice white glow. Loom dial watches have been a bit hit or miss in Loom Wars. I'm excited to see how this one performs. And finally, it's our two edgy micro brands trying to outdo each other. I put these two together because they are stylistically quite similar and because I reckon that Signum would quite like to pinch a few customers and a little bit of market share of Zelos. Zelos, always has been fantastic when it comes to loom, and this Mako titanium was no different when I reviewed it a couple of weeks ago. Very strong mixture of C3 and BGW9. Loom filled ceramic bezel insert as well. Now the Signum Cero, it has a forged carbon dial, and they have actually included loom in that forging process, so the entire dial is going to be loomed, as we will find out in just a couple of minutes. Is it going to be more loomed than the Zelos though? That is today's question. Let's charge up that UV torch and find out the answers. So it's Explorer versus wannabe Explorer in the first quarter final. Allow me to explain, my camera records in 20-minute bursts. I always think that 20 minutes with my camera, especially with a fresh battery set in my UV torch, is the equivalent of about 5 hours of human eye. I will, however, add on another 20 minutes and another 20 minutes if I think it's necessary to make an easy decision between the two watches in question. We have got Chromalight on the left. Rolex upgraded from BGW9 a couple of years ago. This is their own proprietary loom, and it is C3 old radium style, going for that vintage Explorer look on the right. Looking good so far. Let's turn up the speed and see how they both do. This one, it becomes fairly obvious fairly quickly. It is not going to be a close competition. C3 Old Radium always struggles a little bit compared to BGW9 or even C3, but this one not even close, and it's certainly going to struggle compared to Chromalight. It is a $350 watch versus a $15,350 watch after all, so I'm not too disappointed by the San Martin. I still highly rate it. I still think it punches well above its weight. It just isn't going anywhere near the Rolex for loom today. The Rolex moves on to the semis. But who will it meet there? Will it meet the Swiss watch company Bunker or the Hamilton Khaki King? I wonder. Just have a look and take a wild stab in the dark as to which of these two watches is going to have the brighter loom after 20 minutes. Yeah, I think you're right too. It is going to be the Swiss watch company Bunker, isn't it? If I turn the speed up, this one, again, not even close. The Hamilton is okay. The hands hang on in there. The indices don't really do as well. But check the loom quality. The BGW9, so many layers. 20 layers of loom on the hands and on those indexes. This one is going to be hard to beat. It's going head to head with the Rolex in the semi-final. That is going to be the semi-final of death, I suspect. Ladies and gentlemen, do not adjust your sets. That Hemel is outrageous, absolutely mad. I've had a few Loom dial watches go through Loom Wars with mixed results. I have high hopes for this one, and I always love to include a Seiko in Loom Wars somewhere. Seiko's Lume Bright is a bit of a benchmark, though. If we remember back to the previous 7 episodes, a Seiko still has not won Loom Wars, and I have had a bunch of Seikos. I've got a few up my sleeve for future episodes though. Let's crank up the speed on these two. You can see towards the end of the first 20 minutes there's nothing to separate them. The Hemel still glowing very brightly here. All of the hour markers, all of the Arabics, the logos, even the bezel insert still glowing very brightly indeed. And as we move on to the second 20-minute test period, both of these watches still doing very well for themselves. My ultimate criteria is at a glance legibility, and for that it requires the hands to be hanging on in there, and the Seiko Sumo hands are certainly hanging on in there quite nicely. The bezel insert has faded on the Hemel, but the hand's still glowing well, and you can still make out all of those hash marks, the minute markers, the chrono hand sitting there faithfully at 12 waiting to be pressed, the logo, everything's still doing very well indeed. I had to go on to a third 20 minutes with these two, so we're almost at the hour by the time I'm going to slow it down and have a look and make the ultimate judgment between them. The Seiko is still legible here when I go back to normal time after an hour, particularly the hour hand and the loom pip, but the Hemel, just remarkable amount of loom still all over the dial and still on those hands. So it takes the victory today. It moves on to the semis. One semi-final place available, and it's between the Zelos on the left and the Signum on the right. So that's what a forged carbon dial infused with loom looks like then, I guess. Really interesting kind of organic pattern there. a bit of an animal print effect to it. Now both of these watches look pretty spectacular when they're pumped full of UV and you turn out the lights. You notice a little bit of a two-tone effect on the Zelos there and all of that lume on the dial of the Signum. However, it's one of these kind of blink and you'll miss it effects. If I crank the speed up on both of them, you notice that the chapter ring on the Zelos vanishes pretty quickly, as does the lume on the dial of the Signum. Nice effect though. I'm more interested in how legible these two are going to be in the long haul after 20 minutes, after 40 minutes, or even after 60 minutes. So let's go. 20 minutes, nothing to choose between them at all, I don't think. Those big broad hands of the Signum certainly helping with legibility. Do they help it after 40 minutes? These two very, very close, neck and neck in some respects. I think the Signum bezel insert lasts longer than the Zelos, but the Zelos hands and indices seem to be lasting longer than the Signum. I had to take these two to the hour as well. I'm going to slow them right down at the end. Some of you are probably staring at your mobile phones, looking at an entirely blank screen, thinking I'm mad here, but I can still see something. I'm going to give this one to the Zelos based on the strength of the hour hand and the minute hand. I can still pick them out, whereas the Signum is pretty much gone. So it's the Zelos, but only by a nose. Alright, first of the semis then, and you got to think that the winner of this one is going to be the hot favourite to take out Loom Wars Episode 8. It is of course the Rolex on the left versus the SWC bunker on the right. Similar tonally, but using different types of loom. It's Rolex's Chroma Light on the left and BGW9 Super Luminova on the right. Both look very, very bright initially. Let's turn the speed up and see how they go. End of the first 20-minute test period, and really there is nothing to separate these two watches, so on they go for another 20. End of that second 20-minute test period, and again there is pretty much nothing to separate these two. They're going all the way, they're going to the hour, and as we get to the end of the hour, I'm going to slow it right down here. Not much to separate them, but I think the Rolex noses ahead here. It just edges ahead here by being a little bit crisper. There's still a clarity to that Chroma Light that there isn't evident anymore from the BGW9 of the SWC. I'm going to give this one to the Rolex, but again, it is very, very close, and considering the price difference between them, the SWC does very well for itself, but ultimately the Rolex heads to the final. My goodness, what a loom shot with those two. I cannot remember any more loom videos being brighter than this one. That Hemel is just outstanding, and Zelos, we know, no slouch when it comes to loom itself. Let's crank the speed up though and see which of these two ultimately gets to take on the Rolex in the final. Again, this was not an easy decision to make. I love how you can see where the minute hand of the Hemel has protected the dial. There's that little fade, which again still is evident towards the end of the first 20 minutes, towards the end of the second 20 minutes. These two also I had to take to the full hour, which is more than through the night viability, let me assure you. Alright, I'm going to slow this one down at the end here. Very, very close. At a glance legibility, I'm going to give this one to the Hemel. I think that the minute hand on the Zelos is the difference between the two. I think the hour hand is still glowing well, but the minute hand on the Zelos, it's going to fade. If I'd taken it to another 20, it would have been clearer. I'm going to give this one to the Hemel. Fantastic result from a loom dial watch. Let's see how it gets on in the final against the roller. And there they are then, our two plucky finalists, the Rolex on the left and the Hemel on the right, quite clearly. Now I always think that fresh Duracells in my UV torch is a good idea. It always means though that I end up running these things for what feels like days. I ended up having to go for an hour and 20 minutes to actually get a clear, distinct winner out of these two, and even then it's not necessarily distinct. Lesson being, there are no losers here. Both of these watches have absolutely outstanding loom, but it wouldn't be Loom Wars if I didn't pick one as a winner. So let's crack on with it. End of the 20 minutes. Yeah, that's not much use. Let's move on to the next 20 minutes. Next 20 minutes, yeah, still not much use. The bezel insert on the Hemel is fading, but those hands have that kind of eerie blue glow about them quite clearly. Very, very impressed with this Hemel. Next 20 minutes, we're heading up towards an hour now, and both of these watches still glowing. As I said, all night legibility, viability, absolutely no problem therefore. Next 20 minutes. Now, some of you I'm sure will be looking at a black screen by now, so I'm just going to slow it right down at this point, and I'm going to make a call, and I'm going to call it in favour of the Hemel. There's that eerie white blue glow from the hands. Pretty much everything else has gone on both watches. I think the minute hand on the Rolex is the difference between the two watches. That Mercedes hour hand and even the second hand still glowing brightly, the minute hand not so much. Yep, the hour hand and the minute hand on the Hemel still glowing. It takes victory today. Gee, they really knocked it out of the park with that one, didn't they? And there we are, Hemel airfoil. It is your turn today to bask in the glory of your victory in Loom Wars episode 8. You'll be able to see a review of this one coming up on the channel over the next couple of weeks. It freshly arrived in Sydney a couple of days ago. It'll give me some time to play with it, but yeah, we know the loom is absolutely outrageous. As I said, I've had a few loom dial watches, I've had spinnakers and so on that have kind of faded very quickly. This one, not so much. Loom, absolutely fantastic. Well done, Hemel. So there you have it. Well done for making it all the way to the back end of the video. Another installment of Loom Wars run and won. That Hemel is mighty impressive. If you enjoy this type of thing and you're bored today, why not check out Loom Wars 7, Loom Wars 6 or any of the others in the series. Thanks for watching. I'll see you soon.